So I like to start with myself. My name is Jacqueline Wright, and I am the chair for the Advocate and Social Justice Committee for the High Desert Pearls, an official interest group of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. High Desert Pearls has been bringing service to all mankind to the high desert communities of Adelanto, Apple Valley, Barstow, Hesperia, and Victorville. Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated is the first sorority established by African American college educated women, and we have been providing service to all mankind for 116 years. Under the leadership of our international president, Danette Anthony Reed, we are serving our local community under 5 public facing initiatives. One of which of our initiatives is Advocate for Social Justice, which is the program that today's event falls under. We have been holding these sessions to support individuals in the community who may be interested in holding public office. These sessions are proposed to create a better understanding of the process to becoming elected. We are so grateful to our partners, Rock, Family Assistant Program, and Campaign in the Box, and our presenters, in collaboration with us for today's effort. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Rock. Oh,
Good afternoon, loved ones. My name is Sir Duplashan, and I am a founding member of ROC, which is Reimagine Our Community. And what ROC is, basically, it was formed to create a table because we found that as um, Black people in the high desert, especially, we weren't being invited to a lot of the tables. And so we said, we're going to create our own table. And then that way, people will have to come to our table to make sure that they have our voices. But what we focus on is training future leaders to engage in strategically informed, effective advocacy and activism that empowers communities and their citizens to pursue positive change politically, economically, and socially. So far, we formed 2 committees. One, an education committee that's working on creating. Actually, they already have created a Black LCAP. We also have a health and wellness committee, and we're also in incubation for starting a Black Worker Center here in the high desert. And right now, with the Black Worker Center, we're advocating to Brightline to ensure that many of those 10,000 living wage jobs that they said they're going to create are going to be occupied by people who live here in the high desert. We're also working on Heart and Soul Initiative out in North Adelanto. We're working to heal and build that community and provide, give them means to build resiliency. ROC stands for Reimagine Our Community, and that's what it's all about. I'm actually doing double duty because I'm also a represent. I also work for Family Assistance Program, and I'm also on their board. So I'd like to introduce Family Assistance also. It was started in 1985 as a domestic violence shelter, and throughout the years, the agency has just changed so much. They have just grown to do so many other different programs. And I'd just like to tell you about a couple of them. We now have Our House or My Place, which is a youth in crisis shelter. We have the Hope House, which is housing for for victims of domestic violence. We have the Open Door, which supports victims of human trafficking. We have the Fam Spot, which is a youth drop-in center and hangout, right there on 7th Street in Old Town Victorville. We have Open Arms, which is another drop-in center down in San Bernardino. We have Next Step, which is a reentry program, and our most recent addition is Welcome Home, which supplies supportive housing for transitional age youth ages 18 to 24. And we are very happy to be part of this initiative, this program to empower people in who want to run for office. And with that, I'd like to go ahead and pass it over to Campaign in the Box.
Great. Thanks, everyone. So myself, Roger Ouellette, Pete D'Alessandro, and Nicole DiMaria represent Campaign in a Box. We are a ragtag group of electoral politics veterans. We uh, for many years we worked jumping from state to state on many different electoral campaigns, from the local level up to federal and presidential. So we come with a lot of institutional knowledge and earned experience in the electoral game. And a number of years ago, we got together around the time of the pandemic and said, "Hey, I think, with the experience that we have, there are a lot of good candidates out there that don't have access to the institutional knowledge that we as campaign professionals have, in a way that's affordable, in a way that's accessible." And so we uh, we made the decision to start Campaign in a Box so that we can do exactly what we're doing today, which is try to offer the institutional knowledge that goes in from setting up your campaign to best practices to communications, everything from how do you order the yard signs and march in a parade down to debate prep, and field strategy, and everything else in between. So uh, did I miss anything, Pete?
Nope. That's it. We felt there was a need because so many, having been out there, so many working class and potential candidates, and candidates from what I would call marginalized political communities weren't able to make the races as well as they could have because of what Roger just said. There's people that would agree with you 100% on what you're trying to do, but they won't pick up the phone for less than $3,000 a month or well, how can you do that if you're a working person or someone who's running for the first time who doesn't have these big lists that they can call people to raise money? And so we started it. We thought it would be a joyful kind of way of doing it, and it has been. We've been very blessed. We have been part of some incredible victories with incredible teams from almost everywhere in the country. We were part of the race. We elected the first Asian American woman ever in the history of the Iowa Democratic, it's not even Democrat, Iowa House of Representatives from Des Moines, Iowa. We were part of the race up in Alaska that helped elect Mary Peltola as the first indigenous person ever elected in that state. Very proud of that. Um, and part of it was because they're drawn to what we're saying, but we were drawn to them. The idea that some of these folks just didn't have anyone else that they could talk to and get in on that professional way of doing it. So that's what we're about. This is not a pitch. I just want to explain it in the sense that when you think about things, you go to these firms and the whole thing is based on that we don't have a price point. We decide we want to be part of whatever you're doing. And if the candidate feels comfortable with what we're about, we just say, well, what can you do? We'll figure it out from there. And so that's a little different. It kind of upset a few of our friends in the business, but we're okay with that. And that's what we're about. So before we go on, I do want to let Nicole, who is actually the smartest of all of us and definitely the most energy of any of us in Campaign in a Box, give her quick a bio about why she's such a valued member of this team also.
Hi, everybody. My name is Nicole. I am, as the resident Generation Zero of Campaign in a Box, I am the resident tech wizard. So a lot of what I do is digital and distributed organizing, volunteer management. I help set up SMS texting programs to help with both fundraising and voter contact. I think that texting is really one of those future technologies of campaigns that is not being utilized effectively. And I think that when folks like Pete and Roger bring, folks like me into the process, it means a lot to me to have the chance and to be a voice for that technological upgrade for campaigning. So it's really nice to be here today. Thank you all.
Great. And then I think I am gonna toss it right back to Sir to introduce the mayor, correct?
Yes, yes. I thank you guys so much for being here. Wow, we're very lucky to have your amount of experience to be able to help us through this program. But it is my pleasure to introduce to one and all our mayor of Adelanto. So please join me in welcoming our esteemed mayor, Gabriel Reyes. He has been a dedicated public servant and leader in our community, working tirelessly on just rebuilding Adelanto and making it better. As a he was a longtime resident. He's lived there his entire life, so it's great to have someone homegrown to lead us into the next chapter of of our future. His passion and commitment to the community is second to none. He has made such significant impacts in the economics and in the jobs and bringing in industry. And we are so honored to have Mayor Reyes here with us today. And we look forward to hearing so much more about his insights on how he's been successful in running his campaigns. I've also had the pleasure of actually being the MC on on both of Mayor Reyes's campaigns, and he has done a tremendous job. But let me just tell you a little bit more about the man himself. He has been the elected mayor of Adelanto since 2018. He won his second term back in November of 2022. He was one of five people running for mayor and was able to win that election with 48% of all votes. Mayor Reyes has lived on and off in Adelanto since 1992. He graduated from Silverado High School back in 2005, and he is a sales and marketing consultant with over 15 years of experience. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to the Adelanto's mayor, Mayor Gabriel Reyes.
Thank you so much, everybody. I hope you guys are having an amazing Sunday, right? Sunday afternoon. It is an honor to be here and be able to just share some information, some knowledge on how we can be more effective, right? I think that the most important thing is that we're honest with ourselves and what it is that we're trying to accomplish. But I think the effectiveness and the connection with what it is that we're trying to achieve is the important part. So I'm super excited, grateful, and humbled to just be on here and share some information. So hopefully, my viewpoints where it comes from, it's going to be most definitely position oriented, right? Like being in the seat. I'll for sure talk about some of the things that I've learned along the way on both campaign trails, right? And how what I believe is effective and how you can help accomplish the goals and the promises that we make when we're on the campaign trail.
Great. That's great. We're so happy to have you here today. So it looks like we can hop into the first item on our agenda. Coming off of the last meeting, we talked about a lot of the structural things that get your campaign going in the first place. Whether it's through budgeting and financial aspects, all that type of thing. But now we're going to start with a little bit more of a little bit more in that territory and trying to understand the personal commitment and the buy-in that it takes as a candidate to be the person in the arena and making that choice. I'll give just a short point, and then I want to have former candidates give their, and our elected official, their input and their story, because that is obviously the most engaging element. But when Campaign in a Box that sits down with a potential candidate, the first thing that we say is, you got to be all in, or you got to be all in, or you got to be all out. There's no 1 foot in, 1 foot out mentality to running a race, whether it's municipal or federal. You have to understand that this is going to be a full-time commitment to winning this race. When it's for every hour that you're not knocking on doors and talking to voters, you are on the phone trying to raise money or creating some of the structures that will help continue to build the campaign. That's difficult, and that can be extraordinarily difficult, and especially in Campaign in a Box's experience, we're often working with candidates who don't have the ability to run full time. They are working full time, 40 hours a week, and then also running their campaign. And so that takes a lot of personal commitment, and it takes a lot of conversations with family and friends, to see if this is something worth it, not only just to run the campaign, but just to be a person that is going to now be a public representative. So that's sort of what I can offer from a strategist perspective, but I do want to offer Risa, Pete, and the mayor an opportunity to jump in and kind of share their experience on what it was like to come to that moment, decide to make the run, and some of the conversations that you had to have with the folks that were important in your life.
I can jump in and start on that. I'm Risa Barias. I had run for Adelanto Elementary School District School Board. I'm also the board president for Family Assistance Program, and I currently work for Assemblymember Juan Carrillo. So I've been in the political game for a while. I worked on the Bernie 2020 campaign. I oversaw the field operations for Congressional District 8, which at the time was Mono and Inyo counties, as well as a large geographic swath of San Bernardino County. So I was already really well versed in what campaign life kind of meant, and what it looked like. So I had an idea of what to expect. What I did not really understand what to expect was being the candidate. So they say that it takes 7 times, it takes being asked 7 times to push someone to run. And I'm pretty sure it was a lot more than that. I was asked dozens of times over the years to run. And so, and when my son got into middle school, I started to get really concerned with how things were moving along with his school, what was going on for the teachers, what was going on with all the kids. And I saw that, we had some issues at the school board level. Our teachers weren't getting paid well enough. All the other districts in the area were a lot more competitive, as far as compensation was concerned, as far as benefits packages were concerned. Being a former shop steward myself, I'm very pro-union, and the school district was very not, at least at the administrative and board level. So after being asked by teachers, that was what really pushed me over the edge to actually start doing the footwork to figure out, okay, is this really something that I'm equipped for, that I can commit to? So I sat down with my son. He's now 13. He was about 11 at the time, 10 at the time when I, kicked off and launched everything. And I wanted, to get his understanding that like it's gonna be, I'm gonna be out knocking on doors. I'm gonna have to take a couple extra hours in the evenings to make phone calls, do call time. Um, are we gonna be cool with that? He's like, does that mean more pizza? I'm like, yeah, it means more pizza. He's like, cool, let's go. But that also meant buy-in from my dad who lived and lives with us. That meant, he would be spending a little more time FaceTime with my son too. But he also could see firsthand everything that was going on in the schools. And so he was a really strong support and really encouraged he really encouraged me to run. He was really helpful and supportive on the household side. And really that's what made it possible at all. Because I'm a single mom. Um, and so, a lot of the domestic things fall on my shoulders. And I think this is something that a lot of women experience too when they run is that, even in partnerships, a lot of the domestic load falls on us, especially the mental load of domestic work. And so knowing that delineation of tasks, the share of responsibilities is going to need to shift for a time because of the new time commitment is a really important conversation to have, and it's a difficult one to have. Um, and I think like along gender lines that becomes really difficult. So I think when those are some really important pieces to consider. It's just if I take 2 hours away from my evening after I get home from work, what does that look like for my household, for my family? Who will have to share in that? Are they willing? Are they able? Um, Now and then like if what can be automated as well, because blessed to bot backs, because at least that was taken off of my shoulders. Um, if there are tasks that can be automated, if there are meal subscription services that, if you can afford that, if you are in a position to afford that, and we aren't all able to. For sure, I at the time was not. Still at the time, not really. If you're, but if you're in a comfortable enough position that is possible for you, see what tasks can be automated in your life. Um, but just preparing everybody and really having a genuine, can I count on you to pick this up? Are you going to resent me if you have to pick this up? And is this something that is sustainable long term? Because I'm sure as the mayor will tell you, um, if you do win, there is still more time commitment to follow. So, you have to really consider, do I have this time? Do I have this capacity? Does my family have this capacity? What will suffer? My kid doesn't do after school activities. He is a homebody. And so I was very fortunate that like sports didn't have to suffer or anything like that. But, you know, it is a very difficult choice though, when that is a factor. And I think that is also a reason that a lot of women wait to run until kids are older. Um, the reason that, I chose school board, like, and, I think it's important to like start locally, but B, like, even if I had been, the Democratic Party at one point had asked me to run for state assembly, like, I don't run just to fill seat or like just to fill a spot on the ballot. I run to win. B, if I won, what would that mean for my kid's life? I would be in Sacramento for most of the week. How would that upend his life? How would it upend mine? Just wasn't sustainable. So, that's also a consideration when we get to the later discussion today of what seat is going to work for you, what seat is going to work for your goals, what seat are you going to be able to make the impact that you want to make. So, thanks.
Thank you for that. Pete, you want to jump in?
Yeah, my story is a little different, but all of the contact points are exactly what Risa just said. My personal story is I didn't have the familiar conversations that others would have to have just because of my situation. But what I did do was, and the one part that's kind of parallel was I'm from Illinois originally, so I had grown up in Illinois, just outside of Chicago, in that politics. As a younger person, I had run for office in my hometown and I had won. About the mid 90s, late 90s, my career brought me to Iowa. And so I've really been in Iowa for the last 25, 30 years, and that's where I built my political career from. So in 2016, I was actually the Iowa state coordinator for Bernie Sanders in 2016. And so we pulled that through. And what happened was because of the way the whole thing played out, the situation hit where the opportunity was there, where even though it was a long shot, I made a congressional run because of just the right timing of things where, yeah, I'm one of those folks that works every day. I'm not able to raise as much money and didn't as some of the other folks, but because of the Bernie Sanders tie-in, I was able to be competitive in that way. And so we decided to go for it. We decided to make the run because we thought it was a time to get the issues out that we cared about. But what I did, which is I guess the professional or the political hack parallel to what Reza did, was I actually got 25 of my closest friends and political associates together in a room, most of them in the room, many of them on the phone because they were in other places. And we actually had a discussion about it. Like, what's this going to take? And so I was in a unique situation. So I did have these professionals that were able to line it up and say, it's going to cost this much. And this is what this going to cost. Do we think we can do it? And I think that's the other conversation that is very appropriate to have. The ironic is, obviously, from what we said about Campaign in a Box, that's what grew out of those type of conversations, realizing how many people were out there that didn't have even that kitchen cabinet that could put them on the right track right away. So that was the first conversations that I had before we even decided to do it. The one thing I would say, if it's a race where there's actually going to be, and I think correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think it plays into even what you were talking about. If it's a race where there's going to be any type of significant financial commitment, whether it's you're going to have to raise some money, throw a little, whatever it is, that there's actually going to be filings and that kind of thing. My advice is, and it actually isn't just about the campaign, it is about the things that you were talking about in terms of keeping things in order in all parts of your life. My advice is hire a professional compliance person before you even have a manager, before you have anything else, before you call Campaign in a Box. If you called Campaign in a Box, that'd be the first thing we'd tell you to do. Because what that does is it keeps everything going in the correct way, because every place is different in terms of the rules. And you want to make sure you're doing it right. But secondly, the weight it takes off your shoulder. I can speak as a candidate on that. Knowing that I had this professional team that was making sure the money was going to where it was supposed to go to, that it was making it to the bank, that they were looking at each piece that came in to make sure it was appropriate and flagging if it wasn't. And all of those type of things that goes into it. And then when we were able to bring on staff, to know that, yeah, they're getting paid on time because I have this professional group that's their job on my campaign. That's what we're paying them for, to do that. So that would be it might seem like one of those things you wouldn't think about, but that would be my biggest advice when you're first starting out regardless of what you're running for. If it's going to take that piece, find yourself that person or that entity that can do it. And I would say in the perfect world, although, there's nothing perfect, and there are always exceptions to the rules, there's always unicorns, I would say try to make it so it's not your brother-in-law, or it's not the family member who happens to be a CPA. My brother actually is a CPA, and I knew I couldn't ask him because he would have rightfully said, no, of course I'm not going to do that. But a lot of times, and again, it's because when you're a working class person running for office, you are trying to think, well, I got to do the right thing, but how can I do it on the, not the cheap, but where it's effective? And you would think, well, my brother-in-law is a CPA, he'll do it for me. The joke we always tell folks, because it's technically true, is, if anything ever does go wrong, it's never the candidate, it's always the treasurer that winds up going to jail. And so that's another reason why you don't want to have a family member do it. Now that's a old Chicago adage, but it goes to the point of hire people to do that. Other than that, I would say even in my like it was a familiar thing, everything else lines up with what Reyes was saying. The biggest thing I had to do was, I do this for a living. You can't be running for office and also representing other people. Things can get conflated if that happens, right? Every stand I take, it would not necessarily be a stand that a client has, and vice versa. I don't want to take every stand that maybe, because they're running for different things. So I had to put my shop on hold for 10 months. And that was difficult. We're a small group, and there other people had to pick up things and do things so they could keep going. But I was basically out of commission for 10 months doing what I do. So that's the other thing to think about. Everyone's story is a little different, and you have to mold it a little differently. But that would be my biggest advice. Get a professional to help you with all the compliance type of stuff, and then have that meeting with whoever it is, whether it's family, friends, associates. Have that big meeting, small meeting, but have that important meeting with the folks that are in it for you, to see what their view is before you go ahead and do it.
Pete, I have a question for you. And Gabe,
Yeah.
this is a question for you too. Who is part of your kitchen table? Because and that's something that we generally call it in the political world, is your kitchen table are the people that you consult with. They're the people they're your ride or dies, and they're the people that are in the know. They have the inside track with you. They're the people that you trust the most. So who is part of your kitchen table?
Well, mine was folks that I had been blessed to had gather, I'll call it. Say I had gathered them over the 20 years of working in politics, and they were people that I had met on that level. I would say 85% of them were people I had met on campaigns that had remained friends. They became friends outside of politics. We use that term a lot in politics. My friend, you hear senators say it all the time. I'm talking about they became real friends. So it was people that knew the business a little bit, if you want to call it a business. And then the other 15% were people that I also knew, like my brother, or actually Nicole's mom was on some of the calls. People who were with me, who knew stuff, who understood things, but also were the ones that could tell me, hey, come on, goofball, that's not what you're about. This has nothing to do with that. And they were on that level too. So I would say they were all friends, but I would say a good 85% were friends that became friends because of having the same professional line. But it gets to a point. It was nice to have those other, 5, 6 people that would have been for me no matter what I did. It wasn't about the politics, and it was nice having them there too.
These are some great questions. So I would say my kitchen cabinet in 2018 was very different than 2022. My kitchen cabinet in 2018 was funny enough, it was all God. I had no ambitions for running for political office. In 2018, I had 2 businesses. Me and my wife were living life, traveling the world, having a great time, helping people accomplish their purpose, and in the financial literacy space, and we had 47 employees. So going into the political world was not something that I had a drive for, right? So my kitchen cabinet 2018 was when I received, my internal confirmations, because I'm a very all gas, no brakes. If it's meant to be, it's up to me type of person. I need a blessing, one, from the big guy upstairs, and then two, my wife. That was the only buy-in that I needed. I really needed, right, was the support of my wife, because at that time, it did mean, and again, right, what it meant for my scenario was I'm not going to be at the office. I'm not going to be handling the day-to-days. I'm not going to be picking up the kids, or making it to Bible study, or being at the youth nights. Like it was one of those major adjustments and sacrifices that I needed to make sure that my wife was okay taking. Right. So during campaign season, um, it went from me being at the office 40, 45 hours a week, 50 hours a week, to campaign season, I was at the office 4 hours a week, right? Because I had the privilege, I had the availability to do so, right? So that was my kitchen cabinet team, was my wife and my family, right? So when it came to it, and the buy-in, you're right, Reza. It is 7 times. So in the sales world, they say that you need to tell a person, you need to follow up with the customer 7 to 11 times before they actually make a decision. And the crazy part is that 90% of salespeople stop after the first engagement. If 90% of salespeople stop after the first engagement, there's another 7 that needs to happen before the person is even really thinking about buying a product, right? So that's a statistic. Most of the time is you have to do that, right? So when it comes to buying, Pete, great information. There's a great information. Um, you have to be bought in 100% in what it is that you're trying to do. And unfortunately, a lot of the times the buy-in, what people won't say, the buy-in does have to be financially, right? Because unless you have a good advisor, unless you have a good campaign manager to tell you, people do not understand how important a candidate statement is. A lot of people be like, oh no, I don't need to pay for a candidate statement. 100% of voters are going to see your candidate statement. That's extremely important for you to have into your budget, right? So you have to be financially committed. You have to be, if you're not willing to, so for myself, I looked at my account and I asked my wife, I said, babe, we got X amount of dollars in our savings account. Can I invest 35% of that in my campaign? I don't want to go out and fundraise. I don't want to I don't want to dial for dollars. I don't want to ask my family and hound friends and family to not just go out there and door knock and put out flyers and to do X, Y, and Z. I don't want to ask them to also give me money, right? Because that's a lot to carry, right? Getting people to go out there and door knock with you is a lot, right? Now imagine them door knocking, them texting, them responding, them doing everything else. Now you're also asking them to give you $50 to $100 every week, every 2 weeks. That's a lot of pressure. And what you thought was a small circle, you'll realize really quick how big that small circle gets when money is involved, right? So if I can give any piece of advice to anyone running, is before you run for that seat, be invested before campaign season starts. What do I mean by that? If someone wants to run for school board, now that I'm here, right? And I'm, by no means, please, again, do not take this as a deterrent, but just thinking if there's anything that I can do to prep people to be more politically aware of what happens when you're there, right? If you want to run for city council, go to your city council meetings for at least a year. Understand what the budget really is. Understand what the real problems really are that's going on in your center. Understand the real issues that are out here. That they don't talk about. On the dais because it's a business meeting. Really understand what it is that the position and what it is you're running for, and what your real responsibilities are once you're there. Right in local government, yes, you're a public figure because of the title of being a politician, but you're a policymaker. Nothing more, nothing less. And you are there to create policy and to make sure that the policy gets enforced for the betterment of the community, right? So a lot of times, and I'm grateful that when I looked at my talking points when I ran, my talking points were actually pretty achieved, right? I didn't go too far off, like where, you know, I wanna the purposeness in it, right? Because a lot of us, we have that personal engagement, that personal purpose on what it is that we want to change or what it is that we want to apply. My talking points are actually, you know, better roads, rebrand the city, different outlook, you know, a cleaner city, things like that that were actually achievable, right? Because again, your constituents, if you do get elected and then you want to rerun, they're going to go back and they're like, well, you promised that you were going to do this, 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 and this. Oh, well, what happened was I realized that, you know, that's what I'm saying. Educate yourself before you actually sit in the seat, because then I will guarantee you, I'll speak for myself. What I thought the responsibility of mayor was and what it is that I can do was 180 degrees different than what it was once I was there. Right. And the reason why I say 180 degrees is because if I say a full 360, I'm just back to the starting point, right, of what it was. Right. So it was literally the exact opposite of what it is that I thought that I can do in that position. And that was a culture shock because, got it. So now those promises that I made, now those things that I said on the campaign trail, how am I going to still be real and be able to be impactful for the people that actually voted for me, right? Because you have to remember, as that elected, whether you're in local government, in school board, and in city and in the city official capacity, yes, we're nonpartisan. But the one thing I will say, it is starting to extremely bleed into partisan, right? And the thing that you have to be okay with is you also have to remember that you don't just serve the people that are the same side as you. You're elected for the whole position, right? So for the city of Adelanto, I have to also think about the people that don't like me, for the people that don't support me, for the people that wish I didn't win. I also have to do right by them because they're also going to be impacted in the decision and the way that it is that we move forward, right? So my first 4 years, the buy-in was 100%, and it was, if you're not bought into the betterment of the city of Adelanto, this really ain't the city that you want to try to come and respectfully spew your narrative. Because if it's not what's best for the city, trust me, we're not going to listen to it and support it, right? Because again, I was very biased in regards to whose public comments were coming to me. Yes, we're supposed to have public comment and everyone can speak on the items, but I look at the speaker card and I see, because the crazy part is, and a lot of people don't realize this, residents do fill out that speaker card. They do put their address down. They do put their phone number down. Like, they let you know, I am a member of your community. As we're a lot of people who don't live in the city or don't live around the surrounding areas, they won't. So again, I'm not elected to do what's best for the county of San Bernardino. I'm not elected to do what's best for Victorville. I'm not elected to do what's best for X, Y, and Z. I'm elected to do what's best for Adelanto. Right. And sometimes that is extremely frustrating because we also have our personal agendas on what it is that we're trying to accomplish, right? So the buy-in, you have to be 150% bought in, I would say a year before you even run. Go to your city council meetings, go to the school board meetings. If you're trying to run for a state, federal, senate position, right? Jump into the Zoom meetings. Try to be there virtually. It's hard to understand what's going on in Sacramento unless you're in Sacramento, right? But if you can plug into what's going on in the sessions and those aspirations, like really get a good base. Volunteer your time at your local office, right? So you can understand like what staff is saying, what it is that they really deal with, right? Because when you have a clear understanding of what it is that you're going after, you have a clear path to be able to accomplish that. Like, I'm not sure if you guys saw my son, right? This is the type of buy-in that you have to have. It's my 11th year. It's my 11-year anniversary yesterday, right? Me and my family, are in the hotel room right now because, I have to be here for this call. So your buy-in has to be 150%. So my boy like, babe, you're really working? Yeah, pops, I'm really working, right? Because these are the things these are the things that your constituents don't see. But these are the things that happen 24/7. I can never remove the hat as mayor. That hat is on 24/7 everywhere that I go. Right. So that's the type of bind that it is that you need to have, because you always have to be you always have to be doing what's best for the people that you represent.
Thank you, Mayor. And if I could just ask a quick follow up, as as someone who was elected, and then decided to make the jump and run for re-election, were the conversations that you had with your kitchen cabinet, your family, and even the conversation you had with yourself, were they similar, or were there some differences in thinking about, okay, now I have some experience, I've had the experience on the job? Were the conversations and the buy-in a bit different?
Absolutely. Again, the buy-in for me in 2022 was very different. So in 2018, my internal support system consisted, I would say, 80% of my family, right? My mom, my dad, my wife, my sister-in-law, my in-laws, and so forth, my church family, stuff like that. Well, 2020, November 19th of 2020, my father-in-law passed away of a heart attack. January 24th of 21, my dad passed away of a heart attack. So in 60 days, my two pillars behind me, right, who were keeping me strong, doing a lot of the labor work, a lot of those, follow-up stuff, were gone, right? And this is something Reza knows. This is something, my dad was at every single council meeting, even Sir knows. Every single council meeting my dad was attending. He was right there, front and center, good, bad, or indifferent. My dad spoke up, right? So 2022, it was more emotional because it was more personal, right? The work, I was used to the work, right? I was used to the work. We got through a global pandemic, a global shutdown, right? So the work appeared to be easier, I would say, moving forward, right? So the buy-in was different. For myself, I didn't really know if I wanted to do it again, right? Because mentally and emotionally, you don't realize the scrutiny that you and your family go through until you're actually in it, right? And there's been several times where I've even had to, remind myself, Gabe, you're a public figure. You're a public figure. Again, people can talk about you. They can call you what you want. Like, it's crazy. And again, Reza can confirm, because she gets the emails to this day. It's crazy what people will say about you. It's crazy how they'll run your name through the mud just because they don't like you, or just because they lost to you. And the crazy part is, most of these people don't even know you, right? So that's the hard part, is really developing a tough skin and being purposeful in what it is that you're doing. For myself, it was a 10-year commitment. It was something that no matter what it is, how many times I got approached, how many this, how many that, it was a 10-year commitment to be here for the betterment of the city before I explored any other options. So yeah, absolutely, the buy-in was different. Also, the support was very different, from people. But yeah, the conversations for sure change.
Thank you, appreciate that. Pete, did you want to jump
Yeah,
in?
there was Justin asked a really good question. Is it intuitive to think that a smaller city constituency would be easier to campaign in and do so successfully, or is that a complete misnomer? Yeah, and as an operative, I would say I don't think it's a complete misnomer to think that. I think that is intuitive. What I would say is, I wouldn't say it's easier. I would say it's different. Does that sound right, Mayor and Reza?
Yeah.
And what I mean by different is, I have this thing, Roger and Nicole have heard me say it a million times when we're talking to legislative candidates in smaller places, city council candidates in smaller communities. Well, neither of them could do it physically, probably, but if I'm trying to think, like, if Barack Obama could have knocked down 75 million doors, that's what he would have done. That's the best way to do it, person to person. The reason you don't do it at that level, and there's a line where that level kicks in, the reason you don't do it at that level and you have to do the other things is because you can't talk to enough people. But if you are running for a race, we tell our state house candidates here, if the win number is somewhere in that 12, 1,400, 1,500, which it is in many places around the country, and Mr. Mayor, you're exactly right. We're telling our folks start a year out. We tell them, let's draw a plan so that you knock on 1,200 doors 3 times and you talk to every voter you need, because you can do that. So that's not easier. That's a tough thing to do, but it's different. Like Mike Bloomberg, you'd beat Mike Bloomberg in that race because you just offset the fact that he has $80 billion, because you're going to talk to everybody one-on-one, and he ain't going to do that. But on the other side, if you are running for these not higher in importance, but higher up the ballot offices, where it does take $1 million to get on TV in some places, or it costs you $250,000 to put a field plan together, it then becomes harder if you don't have access to that. So it's a great question. I would just say that I wouldn't call it easier. I would just call it different. And the other thing that really hit me, and again, poor Raj and Nicole have heard me tell this a million times, but Mr. Mayor, what you just said reminds me of it. My favorite movie about politics, and if it's old, so if some of the younger folks here haven't seen it, look for it on Netflix. It's called The Candidate, and it's about 40 years old now. And I still think it's the best movie about politics. It's that good that it's weathered the time. And quite simply, it's this young Robert Redford gets elected to the U.S. Senate. He was this upstart, no chance of winning. And the last scene is him looking at they announce him as the winner. He wins this race that no one thought he would win. And the very last scene is him looking at his campaign manager and saying, what do I do now? Now what? And then, the music, and then it drifts off. And, as the viewer, you're left with that final scene. But I really think it goes to what you were saying, Mr. Mayor, is that Roger always says, we campaign we campaign in poetry, but you have to govern in prose. And so you have to switch into a different way of doing things once you get elected. But I thought it was a good point. But I just wanted to, and I know Reyes answered it really well too. I just wanted to answer that question because I thought it was a really good question.
Thanks.
I would say this, and with that part of it, I think sometimes it's harder. Like I would say for like local government, right now that they're going the big push for going into districts, right? I think it's even hard. It's going to be even harder because it's not that you're going to a smaller area now. It's what if in that smaller area, you don't know what works in that smaller area, right? So it may not be, don't get me wrong, talking to people is always great, right? But what if that's the worker region? So what if you're out there for months and no one's ever home and you've been knocking doors, but you don't realize that, they're not going to be home during the week. They're only home on the weekends, right? So it's hard to say. That's why going out there on a regular basis and starting so far in advance, it at least gives you the time to be able to make those mistakes where it's not going to potentially cripple your campaign, right? I have a personal phrase that I say, it's either time or money. You're either going to invest the money to get the information that you need to save the time, or you're going to invest the time because you don't have the money and you got to gather that data, right? So those are my 2 cents.
And I think one other piece too is going to be looking at the fields too. Like, how competitive is that field going to be? Because, for some seats, if a seat just opened up, everyone's going to clamor to it. If you have a new an assembly seat just opened up, yeah, you're going to have a really crowded field in your primary. If, there are some seats that, they'll always draw a lot of attention to. The mayoral seat, people will still, even with a successful incumbent, people will still shoot their shot. And, you just have to kind of look at the interest in that seat as well, kind of gauge interest. And I think one of the harder things about smaller or local seats, more local seats with a smaller voter base. When I say smaller, I mean the voter base. That's literally the smallest number that I'm referring to. When we're talking about a smaller voter base, polling is really expensive already, and it's damn near impossible to get statistically significant polling for a smaller local office. So if you only have 5,000 voters, you basically, there is not going to be a statistically significant sample size that you could get to really represent that, to really get an idea of how that election is going to turn out. That's just, based on how statistical significance works. So when you have a lot more voters in an area, like, you can actually start to get those polling numbers. But also that means that you are raising hundreds of thousands of dollars. So it's a toss up. It's going to be a toss up based on, again, your capacity, what kind of backing you have, what kind of fundraising you think you can do, and, what your goals are. I think at the end of the day, if you're running, because something that we used to see from some candidates, from one candidate in particular, is, she would run for Congress every single time. And all the things that she said she wanted to do were things that were better suited to local office. There are things that Congress didn't touch. And then in the meantime, you also have people, who run for city and state things, talking about federal policy. And it's like, that's not, this seat isn't going to make you feel fulfilled. You are not going to be able to achieve those things. You don't get to determine federal policy from the city of Adelanto. So I think that actually might bring us to the next section, Roger, right?
Yeah, and we've covered a lot of it now, and just making the decision of what office is going to suit your goals. And we've talked about a good each of our speakers here has sort of hit it in their own way, and it seems obvious, but when you're deciding on which office to run for, Reese's point is exactly right. We have Risa runs is concerned with the state of our schools and having a child in the school system. Obviously, school board makes the most sense. That's where you're going to have the most direct impact. Pete mentioned understanding he was going to have a tough race as a first-time candidate running for Congress, but there was an opportunity to talk about the progressive issues that he's been fighting for his whole life. So it may seem fairly obvious, but to make the choice on where you want to run for office is it's got to be about personally what your goals are, and an understanding of the scope, scale, and the budget. I don't know if any of you've all kind of covered it in your own way, but I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
The one thing I would add, and I'm going to say it because it sounds counterintuitive. So I'm going to start with the first point. We tell all of our folks we're here to build something that can win. That is the goal. I'm not saying there's moral victories. If you're trying to run for mayor because you're going to be the best mayor, that's what you want to do. However, we also want to be very clear especially with a lot of first-time candidates, or a lot of candidates that are running for a cause, is not everybody is AOC. Not everybody is Mayor Reyes. Sometimes you're building the foundation for a future victory. And sometimes that individual victory might not be yours. You might be building a foundation for the next person to pick up the mantle. And even as important, if you do that correctly and you do win, you've done that also. You've set that foundation for the movement to maybe elect a few council people to keep the pressure on other entities that need to be. So even winning, part of your thought process is, how do I leave something behind that's there, that we've built, that can keep this thing going? And so that would be the only little nuance I would say to it is, yes, you always run to win. but you keep in mind the realism of there are other victories sometimes, even if you don't get the most votes, if you do it correctly.
Absolutely.
Winning's better.
Always, right? I don't think anyone would want to invest all their time, money, and resources if they don't plan on winning. So I'll piggyback over that. If you're not planning on winning, you're gonna be hurting the people in there, right? So, and the reason why I say it, and it's stupid coming from an elected, but this is just for the transparency sake of things, right? The more names on the ballot, in my opinion, the worse that it is for the whole thing. Causes a lot of confusion. There was 1 year in our neighboring city, the city of Victorville, for 3 seats, there was 22 people running. That's a lot, right? More names on the ballot could potentially help the wrong person to win, right? It's a lot easier for your constituency to be able to understand who it is that they're trying to look at, without having a whole bunch of people in front of them, right?
Yep.
Because, but then on the flip side, I will say, being unelected, I did like the fact that I had 4 people trying to run against me, right? Because the reality is now the amount of votes that I have to capture to win becomes a lot easier, right? So it's kind of like a catch-22 from 2 different types of positions, but that's just being honest for you who are taking interest in running in office, right? Are you potentially going to hurt someone who may be strong, right? So, and I know a lot of people look at like, oh, wait your turn. It's not necessarily like a wait your turn, but are you better being a role player in this position while you learn, right? And then also, money plays a huge factor, right? And another thing in sales, right? What we would say all the time is, if they don't know you, they can't flow you, right? So I converted that over into sales. If they don't know you, they won't vote for you. And how are they going to know you if they don't see your yard signs? How are they going to know you if they don't see your text message? How are they going to know you if they don't see your mailers? How are they going to know you if they don't see your ads? How are they going to know you if they don't see you at rallies? How are they going to know you if you're not doing all these things, right? And all of those things require a significant amount of money, because the way that it can be done, now that's another issue, right? Because there's compliancy on how you deliver a message, right? So again, money most definitely does play a huge factor. I'll say this, for local government, if you can't raise $10,000 to $15,000, and in this day and age, don't waste your time. And this is, I'm talking a small city of Adelanto, right? We have 40,000 residents. If you don't have $10,000 to $15,000, don't waste your time. Our neighboring city, the city of Victorville, if you don't have 50 to 75,000, don't waste your time.
And they're
right?
districted.
So,
Adelanto is that large. Victorville is
Mhm.
districted. For Adelanto Elementary School District Board, I raised 17, and there were 5,000 registered voters. At the end of the day, it was about 15,000 voters total, or 1,500 voters total.
So
And
that plays that plays a huge part, So that's why, again, having that year plays such an important factor. One, so that you can save money, right? And if you're not buying in on yourself, don't expect other people to buy into you, right?
Yeah.
So the higher you go, the more it's going to cost, the more everything else. But I did see a question come in here. What should be the priority of a campaign if you find out that you're running unopposed? Great question. If you find out that you're running unopposed, still get your message out there, right? Because how you do one thing is how you do everything. And if you know that you don't have anyone running against you and you just kick your feet back, you're not going to do anything. You're not going to be as effective when you get into that seat, because habits take time to form, right? So treat it like you had a competition. Treat it like maybe not as crazy, right? But still do your candidate statement. Still maybe do one piece of mail, just so that the community knows who it is that you are, because you don't want to come out and be that elected, and then it's like you're only out here because you're an elected, right? Because remember, there's still a negative stigma when it comes to politics.
As an operative, I would say that's a perfect scenario for doing what we were talking about building something while
Exactly.
you're running for the next thing. So
Yeah.
you don't have the pressure of, oh, I might not get enough votes on whatever the election day is. But that gives you a great opportunity to put the fundamentals together to have a grassroots organization that's built because of the campaign that you
Exactly.
can do other stuff with too. So again, really good question.
And you can also really use that, if you're in a good position to do so, to slate up and like support other candidates up and down the ballot who need more support. That's really part of that apparatus. That or it can be part of that apparatus is really community building, really solidifying voices, and aligning, demonstrating alignment. But also like don't let your guard down too much because write-in candidacies are a thing. It's possible. That's like the one thing to be concerned with if you're running unopposed. Um, there's always a possibility of a write-in candidacy.
Yep.
Um, so be
And that
mindful of that.
actually also
But
that actually leads to another thing that I think is important is every place, make sure you know the
yeah,
rules of where you're running. Every place is a
yeah,
little different. Some places the write-in can show up that day and win. There's other places where a write-in has to register to even have their votes count.
yeah,
Another thing to look at is there's some elections where 51% wins it for you. There's other elections where 51% gets you into the finals, but whoever finishes second still going to be in the finals. And then where I'm from, there's even another layer where if nobody, and this goes into what you were saying, Mr. Mayor, it's why I was thinking about it, was if nobody gets to 35%, which could very well happen in a 20 person race, where I live, if nobody gets to 35%, it goes to a convention.
oh
You know,
no, that sounds awful.
yeah.
Just
So
want to put that out there.
and
Yeah.
every place is different. So it's always important. The larger point is know what the rules are where you're running
Yeah. And
and
also
what you're
I
running
just want to
for.
one thing I wanted to circle back on too, on like a large field. Um, I just want to note also that that can be strategic sometimes, where like, parties will often do that, where if they see that, a seat um is potentially up for grabs, they will try to um goad the other party into flooding the field. Or if they see that a lot of the other party is already flooding the field, they will consolidate and they will make sure they'll work really hard with the candidates from their own party to make sure that they are not flooding the field so that, the other party will cannibalize itself and they will walk in with their top two. That's, usually a more of a primary strategy, but just wanted to note that that is also something to watch out for. And it's not necessarily something that, at this level we'll be employing, but it's fun to notice. I do see a question too. What percentage of your fund or war chest should be self-funded and versus support and contributions? Um, Honestly, I did not put a lot into mine personally. But I also was fortunate enough to have a solid donor base. Because at the time I worked for an environmental nonprofit. That was, some of my coworkers were part of my kitchen cabinet. Um, I, I was well connected in the political sphere where I knew that people in my networks would contribute and we would contribute substantially, or that I would be connected with organizations that would be contributing as well. Most of my donors were other political action committees, unions, etc. But I think it's going to depend too on your fundraising capacity and capabilities, what you can afford. Because then you also have people like Gil Cisneros, who won the lottery several years ago and just bankrolled his own campaign to the tune of a couple million, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
So it really is going to depend on your capacity, what you want to raise, what you can afford.
Yeah, and Pete Nicole and I always say this too is uh if you have the ability to do that, and then take that call time and put it into door knocking, or then you can, and you have every right to do that, especially because in depending upon the office, you are allowed to loan the campaign the money, and then once you raise it back, you can get that money back. But I think ultimately what we try to say is if you can, the way in which you can build a donor network, they all none of these things exist in a vacuum. So if you're building a strong donor network, you're building a strong support network, you're building a strong voter network, you're building a strong volunteer mechanism. So um, really no right or wrong answer there, but just wanted to um, give that perspective there.
Yeah. I would say two things, right? Year one, I was self-funded. I, loaned myself $15,000, and I was self-funded. But of course, along the way, got a couple, here and there from friends and family, and people on the way. But year two, re-election in 2022, I was probably 90, no, I was 100% donor, right? A lot of people, there was a lot of PACs, and I'll be honest, I didn't even know what a PAC was until like the second go around, right? So there's a lot of money out there. But here's also the negative part that can come with being having donors, right? Is your opponents can pull your Form 460s and look at who's donating into your campaigns, and they can create hit pieces, or they can create negative talking points about it, right? So for me, being in a cannabis city, there was talking points out there like, oh, the mayor's being, funded by the crooked cannabis mafia. They want to keep him in office and blah 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 blah, because you can't control what people say about you, right? So, and I would say for someone new that's running, if you do go heavy donor base, the one thing that I would say is that I would recommend is tell your donors, you're not donating to me because I'm gonna do a favor for you. You're not donating to me because I'm gonna help you pass or get anything approved. You're donating into my campaign because you believe I'm the best person for the job, right? Because that way you have peace of mind and you have protection, and you don't have to feel like when you win, like, oh my goodness, ABC Incorporated, they helped me, and oh my gosh, they got a project coming down the line. I got to make sure the project passes, right? Like, you don't want to put yourself in harm's way thinking that you owe someone a favor, right? So just make it very clear, if you do go heavy donor base, that you just let them know, like, look, if you're supporting me for a favor, if you're supporting for X, Y, and Z, I don't want your money. You're supporting me because I'm gonna be the best assembly, the best da da da, to best mayor, to get the job done. So that's what I'll say on that.
Thank you. So just we've talked a lot about structure, buy-in, and now it's actually time to start honing the ethos and the pathos of the campaign, and your messaging, and how you're going to sort of publicly present. And this is kind of where a lot of what I do at Campaign in the Box comes in. I'm always talking about it as an internal and external communication in the campaign. You want to make sure that your internal communication, before you start getting out there and start running your campaign, that from pretty much top to bottom have your messaging goals set out, your bio set out, just everything that you want to be able to answer pretty much as much as you can about yourself, about how you want to run the campaign, right out of the gate, because you never want to get sort of caught on the back foot, or seeming like that you're in trouble right from the get. So uh when I talk about campaign communications, I always talk about it from a space of clarity, consistency, and confidence. So three C's, pretty self-explanatory. But Pete mentioned before, we campaign. I've heard it before. I didn't create the adage, but I heard it and I ran with it. We campaign in poetry and we govern in prose, and so that is what I mean when I talk about clarity. Um, about clarity, because you whether it's on the doors, in a stump speech, at a campaign event, people are really only you're only going to have a few, somewhere between 30 seconds or 5 to 7 minutes in your stump speech to have everybody in that room or have that one-on-one conversation understand uh, who you are, where you come from, and what you're all about. And so having that nailed down is an incredibly important aspect to your campaign. So I wanted to sort of start with what I like to start with when talking with any candidate, is drafting a why. And what that is it is your call to action, your inspiration, your sort of hero's journey for running. Um, and a lot of people, what we've seen is, like, a lot of people can conflate that for your biography, which is an important element, but it's not your reason for running. People want to get that sort of, here's the inflection point in which I said, this needs to change. I can't take this anymore. Whether it comes from a good or bad inspired place, or a place where you were pissed off. That's sort of I'll give you in the example. An example I have is, right now we're working for a doctor who's running for office in Arizona. They're an emergency room physician, and they have seen firsthand how our healthcare system has just left people behind. Has people avoiding care until the last second. They have seen that for over 20 years, and they are saying enough is enough. I'm running for Congress because I want to transform the American healthcare system. I want to go to Washington. I want to make the argument. And so that is, the bio of this candidate is they spent 20 years working as a emergency room physician, but the why is what is driving them to, to step into that, or to step into the arena. And what I tell candidates all the time is, in order to sort of really kind of get a concise vision for your why, is to sit down and just write it all out. Write out your story, your biography, your experiences, what you're happy about, what you're mad about, and why, and how that led you to run for office. And so just kind of wanted to bring it to Risa or Pete and the mayor, see if you had any experience in sort of that initial sitting down and saying, why am I doing this?
Yeah, I'll just go to an anecdote, which I often do. It's a classic now. It's the thing that we show in the classes when we talk about folks running for office. But in 1979, Ted Kennedy was up in every poll against everybody he was going to run against for president. He was about to announce for president, sat down with a reporter who was considered a friend of the family and a long time reporter, to do a piece on 60 Minutes or whatever it was, and literally couldn't answer the question, why are you going to run for president? I mean, that's as simple as it gets. And so that's the like historical example of just know the basics that you're going to talk about. And it seems like it should go 1 and 1. And I think it does with people. And obviously with folks on this call, it does. But that's usually, you would think you would have that answer, not because you've been coached, but because that's what drove you to run. Is I'm running for A, B, and C. Now, sometimes you'll have to get better at answering that as you go along, because you're not necessarily a professional politician. But this was such a weird case that's still used as the example, because here was this like person that they said might be the next president, who had this long history, who people knew, who couldn't answer the question. So it was almost the other side of that coin, and it all went downhill from there, and it didn't happen. As we know, he was not president. And so, but that's just what I would say is, yes, it's if you know why you're running, that's your answer. And that might sound easy to say from an operative, so I'll let both Reyes and the mayor weigh in on that, but that's, I think you're right there with that.
I think so. For me, it was seeing how the school district had, received all this money that was supposed to, go like support teachers through COVID, be spent for COVID related and adjacent support systems, but also there were allocations to increase teacher pay, and we all saw inflation rising rapidly, and they did not increase teacher pay, and we started hemorrhaging teachers, and good teachers at that. The good teachers were going over to the next door districts that were offering all years. So for me, it was really important that we brought the focus back to paying our teachers well and staying competitive and making sure that we were giving our teachers the due for all the work that they did for our kids, and all the work that they do for our kids, and all the work that they need to do for our kids. Because if we can't support our teachers, who is going to be there for our kids? But when I sit on endorsing panels, something that I do look out for, and something also that I look out for with the candidates that I do consulting work for, I hate hearing, I just want to give back to my community. That's a red flag for me, because that means you don't know why. You don't have a real why. Like, yes, we love our communities, but if you don't have like a specific, this is what I want to fix, this is what needs repair, this is my tangible, workable goal. Giving back is so vague and ambiguous that it reads to me as, I want this for me. I want this for my own, for my own ego. I want people to see me doing good. Same thing with, I had a candidate who was like, I just feel like I have a higher purpose. I don't care about your higher purpose. That's not what's in it for me. When you're talking about marketing, when you're talking about pitching yourself, when you're talking about pitching a product, even in sales emails for products that you actually already like, you're not telling them like, this is now available. You're telling people what's in it for me, right? I don't want to, like, cool, you have like a retinol eye balm. What's in it for me? Get this before it sells out. This is a revolutionary product for under eyes that, set like firms up, blah, 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 blah. Tell me why I want it. What's in it for me? So with candidates, bringing it back to that, you're not telling them about you when you're talking about your why. You're telling them what's in it for them too. You're telling them what you hope to achieve, not what you personally get out of it.
Yeah.
I would say to this part, keep it stupid simple, right? I use the KISS method. You don't want to overcomplicate it, but you have to have a why. You have to, like, what hurts you? Like, why are you doing this? Like, for my example, when I was running for mayor, my mayor pro tem and my mayor were both arrested, and one of them was actually charged with, FBI charges, right? So for me, I was sick and tired of. I'm from Adelanto. I'm raised in the city. I moved to Hawaii. I travel the world. I come back home. I see my region blow up. There's a new city called Oak Hills. Victorville's thriving. Apple Valley's thriving. Hesperia's thriving. I come back home and we got prison and weed. Right? I'm just like, dude, come on. It can't be that hard. Right? So for me, it was a frustration. For me, it was a disappointment, right? Seeing that everyone else around was doing good, but we weren't. So be purposeful, because when no one's giving you money, when no one's answering the doors, when people are calling you names on social media, when your friends aren't volunteering anymore, when the donation account has no money, when everything is going 100% against what it is that you had planned, why are you going to keep going? Right? That's why I would, because like we mentioned earlier, I think P mentioned it earlier, all that work, all this work to campaign, it's just a campaign. It's just to win the seat. Now the work starts. Now the learning starts. Now the training starts. Oh, you want to talk about how you couldn't do it because you had a full-time job and this, that, and the third, and X, Y, and Z, and you made those excuses when you were campaigning? Guess what? Those same excuses are going to be there when you're in office. If you can't figure it out when you have a job, don't think that the world's going to miraculously change around you and be available now that you're the elected. Don't think that grand openings, don't think that ribbon cuttings, don't think that that investors into your community, that developers into your community, that special workshops, that all these things are going to revolve around your schedule. Oh, well, you know what? The second Wednesday and fourth Wednesday of every month doesn't work for me at 7 p.m. Wednesdays is my kids, basketball practice, my daughter's recital, my church Bible study, my yoga session, my you know what I mean? Like, none of that matters. It's not going to change and automatically have availability because you are now the elected. So all of those things you have to take in consideration, right? That you're doing all of this work to get to be able to represent what it is that you're campaigning for, to be that person. And the reality is, especially in the political world in today's time, people can rewrite through you. I think people can see a fugazi. I think people can see a fraud. I think people can see a fake. I think people can see a politician. All those things from a mile away, right? And if you're not in a politically motivated position, like running for Congress, like running for assembly, like running for Senate, like running for governor, whatever it is that you're running for, if it's not politically motivated, like, people are gonna see it. They may not tell you to your face, just how with the Gen Z, right? They may not tell you that they think that you're an idiot, but they'll tell their friends and everybody else that you're an idiot, right? So understand what it is that you're really doing, and think about the worst of the worst of the worst that could happen. And I would say when you hire your campaign consultant, when you hire your campaign manager or your compliance director or your political advisor, right? I would say one of the first few sit downs that you should have is have them give you all the ugly, right? Have them give you all the ugly, all the everything that's going to happen. And if you think that you can survive that, then, because again, don't waste their time, right? Because of course they're doing it to win. Yeah, they're gonna get paid to do it, but also, not all money's good money, right? So don't waste their time. Don't waste your time. Don't put your family through the drama, or your loved ones through it. So when you're creating that reason, you gotta believe in that reason through thick and thin.
Yeah, and and you can be to be additive to that. You can be the most adept at all the issues going on in your race. You can have every talking point down, but if you fumble the lie, as the mayor said, people are gonna see right through that. And just moving along and being conscious of time. But as a entryway into talking about the messaging and the of your campaign and the issues, I wanted to just spend a little bit of time talking about two really important elements that go into probably the most important elements of your outward messaging of the campaign and how to set that up for success. And one is building your I call it a campaign Bible, other people call it a messaging master doc. This is a living, breathing document that has every talking point, how you're going to message it in a truncated, concise way, and uh, and it has everything from the issues in the race to how you're going to talk about the opposition, how you're going to talk about self-criticisms, the ugly stuff, as the mayor pointed out. And this is something that is the thing that I deal with on the daily that is the hardest to do, which is we can have the document there, we can be updating it all the time, we can have the best messaging out there, but if you are a candidate or an elected that is not going to practice and to put in the time to learn your messaging, you will not perform well when it is time to step onto that debate stage or when it is time to step into that interview, or when it's time to get on the dais for the forum or face public public comment. It's it is and there's no magic way of there's no magic way to accomplish that goal other than to sit down and do the work. Now, a tool of that is that I like to use is a communication square. It's us on us, them on them, us on them, and them on us. And basically, you got your four squares. What are we saying about ourselves, and how are we saying it? What are they going to say about themselves, and how are they going to say it? What are we saying about them, and what are they going to say about us? And that, in the sort of world of the electoral campaign in which you're dealing with having to think about the competition, that is the best way to sort of get a full scope of here's how I'm going to present, here I think they are going to present, and this is where I think we have our advantages, here's maybe our disadvantages, and this is how we have to message around them. And I won't filibuster this whole thing, and I'll open it up to our electeds and candidates. But I also want to just really drive home the importance of your campaign stump speech, because it's not just at a campaign event you're standing up and giving a stump speech. You're giving some form of your stump speech every time you're on the phone to a donor, at the door, talking to a voter. It is whether that's you truncate it down from 5 or 6 minutes down to 2 or 3 at the doors, but you want to be able to effectively introduce yourself, give a little bit of your background, give that why, introduce the 3 or 4 most important issues in the race, and do it clearly and concisely. And so, best practices that I have found for your stump speech is 5 to 7 minutes max. Start if you're and I'm just talking in a room. If you're in a room, start with thanking everybody for being there. Make sure that there's a connection there. There's you're recognizing that people are there with you. I'm not just talking at you. get your quick bio and background in that relates to the community that you're in, if there is one. Move into your why. Then your top three issues, the three issues that three to four issues that that your audience is going to want to hear you address. And then the most important element to all this that I think a lot of people that I often find candidates forget is closing it out with a call to action. Is now we're here. I've explained to you what we want to do, and then I go, great, thanks for that, and then you walk off the stage. No, you want to bring everybody, you want to give everyone the opportunity to be like, this is the vision. If you're on board, let's go do it together. Join our campaign, volunteer, make a donation, do whatever you can. So just wanted to kind of get that in quickly, and before I turn it over to our candidates and electeds, the last thing I'll say on that is, you are going to feel, when you are, whether you're giving talking points from your messaging Bible or when you're on the stump, it will start to feel stale, and it will start to feel like you're saying it in your sleep, and it doesn't feel like anything anymore. That is where the consistency comes into play. Every audience, you've given the speech 10,000 times, but every day there's a new audience hearing it for the first time. And if it's good, stick with it. Do not. The biggest mistake that I see candidates making is shifting their positions based on the last person that they talk to, and it's really gotta be about, if you know what you're going into the campaign and how you're going to message on these issues, unless there is like provable data in polling, or you're getting a lot of feedback on the doors about a way in which you're talking about an issue, that they might stick to what got you there in the first place, and don't move off that point. The clearer that you can make your campaign, the more you can stick to the point of, this is why I'm here, this is how we do it, this is how we fix it, let's do it together. You slice through all the crap that happens in a campaign. And so just wanted to get that down, and maybe just open it up to our candidates and the mayor to sort of give some feedback about that, maybe some experiences of what it was like, giving that stump speech, or what you learned from kind of doing that over and over again, and talking to, whether it was on the phone, talking to voters out on the doors, or in a public setting where you're giving the campaign speech.
The one thing that comes to mind on that in my case was, everything Raj said, I agree with. But as the mayor said, if you're running for a while, we're not saying be so stringent into, this is my 3 minutes and I got it memorized now. You're going to pick up things along the way, and you're going to actually get better, because you're going to realize, that worked, that doesn't, this works every time, I'm always going to keep that in there. And the speech by the end of your campaign is still going to be pretty much your values and what you're doing, but you'd be surprised at some of the nuanced differences in the order you said things, how you put it together. I'll be honest, I look back, maybe I'm doing some self-analysis here, but when I first started running, my speech had a famous quote in the beginning, a quote in the middle, and it ended on a quote from somebody else. By the end of it, I only had the quote at the end. And one of the reasons was, someone came to me and said, well, no, you found your own voice. You didn't need all those other people's quotes to get to the point you were making, because everything in the speech after those quotes that was my bridge to get to my points stayed the same. It's just that I didn't need those other folks anymore to get me there. And then the other thing I would say, and I hope it doesn't sound contradictory, because it isn't, is yes, practice, be ready, know your stuff, but be able to pivot and punch too. You know, the great political philosopher Mike Tyson said, you know, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. And you got to be ready for it. And so as much as your plan might be exactly where you want to be, you do have to still have that ability and that wherewithal to know, oh, that didn't go the way it usually does. I've got to be able to pivot here, and still you're not changing anything, but to still be able to affect the things that you weren't thinking were going to happen, and the things that weren't as, like I said, you got punched in the face. It wasn't what you thought it would be. You got to come up with another plan. So that would be my only two things to say there about that. And I think it's exactly right.
So before I was a campaign consultant, before I was a community organizer, I did marketing and I specialized in branding design. And language is a really big part of that for me. And one of my favorite branding exercises was developing your brand's persona, because at the end of the day, as a candidate, you are a brand to a very high degree. I know we don't like to think of it that way, but that's how it works. People are going to see a persona. You know, you are gonna be authentic. You want this to be your authentic self. You are also gonna have to put your authentic self into writing. And sometimes you might need to formalize it just a little bit. We're not gonna use the same kind of colloquial jargon slang that we do on a campaign mailer that goes out to everybody that we will in conversation with each other. Even the way that we're talking right now isn't necessarily the way that I'm going to talk with my best friend over brunch. We, you know, we're not wearing masks, but we are buttoning ourselves up. We are getting dressed for the job that we want. And that is how I look at the kind of persona exercise. So when I wrote my, candidate persona for myself, I looked at the campaign as A, its own entity. B, this is the person that you go to when you have questions that you know that you're not going to get judged for, but they'll be able to answer them, with a good degree of authority. Almost like a trusted aunt, or a trusted, a trusted teacher, somebody like a trusted person of authority. For some brands, I wanted that to be your best friend. For some brands, I wanted the persona to be your sister that like you can tell anything to. The real talk kind of person in your life. So think of your campaign through that lens. Who is this person to everybody else? And write accordingly. That's going to shape the language that you use in your mailers. That's going to shape the language you use in social media, because you want to be consistent across the board and you want it all to be rooted in your why, in your purpose. Your stump speech is going to be your voice. That is going to be in your voice. You're going to be doing it over and over and over again. And yes, it's going to feel redundant to you, but when your why is sincere and authentic, if you can speak sincerely to what you're saying, it's going to come off authentic anyway, because it is. People can read sincerity. People can hear it. People can feel it. So yeah, it's going to, feel like a little bit of it's going to drone to you personally, but continue to feel it. Try to tap into your real why when you do your stump speech. Feel that. Continue to, tap into your feelings about that why. And then one more piece on language. One thing that I do notice, this is something I like personally, and I think we touched on it lightly last time, is like, and the us as them as them model actually reminded me, when you're shaping your language, when you're deciding on how to develop your kind of brand Bible and develop your language Bible, think about what person you're speaking from. Are you speaking from the first person and everything? Are you speaking in the plural first person? Are you speaking in the royal we? I feel more comfortable, and this is like more of like, now I've developed the preference, now I developed the eye for it, but subconsciously, People respond better when they hear us language, when they are part of the message, when they are included in it. People don't respond as well with the I, me, because they can feel like it's not about us. I'm not included in that. This is for you, and you're asking me to support you. You're not asking me to join you in supporting our community. And there was actually a case study on this between Bernie Sanders' messaging and Hillary Clinton's messaging. And that was a really interesting piece that, people had feelings about it and they didn't know why they had feelings about it when they just read the message, separated from the candidates. So that's something I love to keep in mind, and like I love to advise people to keep in mind as they develop their language, as they start crafting their messaging, as they start to really build out your brand.
Yeah, absolutely. Your messaging should complete your brand, right? Because your brand, you can, a picture says 1,000 words, right? Your brand can say a lot. Your brand can say if it's welcoming, if it's not, if it's busy, if it's like, so all of those things you got to take in consideration. And we're speaking from having a consulting aspect or a team, like Campaign Box, right? So I would say in the development of your brand, most definitely, if you're going to hire someone, take your feelings out of it, because they're probably going to tell you everything that you're probably not going to want to hear when it comes to development of the brand, because you are not the professional, right? If you're going to pay, just for example, if you're going to pay Campaign Box $5,000 to be the people that develops everything for you, the framework, don't tell them, how to do it, how to go about it. You're hiring the professionals to make this happen for you, right? So take that in consideration. When it comes to your messaging is, in my opinion, everything. And how it is that you deliver it, how it is that you practice it, and who it is that you are, right? What it is that you're going to stand on during your campaign trail. I love how Pete said, everyone has a plan to get punched in the mouth, right? 100%. But how are you going to respond when you get punched in the mouth? How are you going to respond when someone gets punched in the mouth and the perception was created to have it come from you, right? So I'll speak to a situation that happened this last election cycle. Fellow council member ran against me for mayoralship, for the mayor seat, and there was a group of people who decided to do some pretty vicious and attackful mailers that most definitely caused a division, right, amongst out there in the public. And you can tell that those mailers shook the individual when we had a public forum, right? Now, what did I want to be known as? Did I want to be known as a person who supported and condoned that type of, political strategy? Or did I want to be known as a person, as the leader of my community, that is compassionate and sympathetic to the matter at hand, right? So right away, there is a young high school kid asked this question. And that's just, remember, even the people who are not voting are seeing these things that are going on in your community, and they're seeing what type of leadership it is that you're going to be. And they asked specifically about the tension that was shown on the panel, right? And when I spoke to it obviously saying, I am so sorry that it happened, right? That should have never happened in our community, because we don't stand for that type of behavior in our city. And I'm sorry that it happened, but and I expressed it to the young lady, I'm sorry that you and your family went through this, because again, it's not just the person running. It's everyone that's in their immediate circle as well, right? So be prepared. I would say, if you're going to want to fight an ugly, dirty campaign, be ready for an ugly, dirty campaign to get thrown your way, right? So again, and that's also going to speak to the type of leader that you're going to be in that seat, right? Are you going to be the aggressive? Are you going to be the fighter? To these scenarios, right? So deliver the proper verbiage, deliver the proper messaging. And I love how we're talking about, if you start a year ahead in advance, you're able to develop your talking points right ahead. Again, everything's going to be one or two things. If you cannot raise the money to get you the tools and resources in the team, then you have to start ahead of time. Now, if you're going to be raising money for that long, make sure you get a compliance officer, because I don't know what the process is to be able to raise money prior to being able to file. I believe in the city of Atlanta, you can't file paperwork until August prior to the election. So if you're going to be out there for 8 months, are you in compliance receiving that type of money? Right? Did you go through the proper protocol? So all of those things, take that into consideration how you want to run your campaign, because the one thing that no one tells you about is there is an entity that monitors you and will fine you and will slap you in the wrist, and it's called the FPPC. And whether you're an elected or not, they hold you to that standard of it all, right? So run hard, give it 150%. And in your messaging, the last thing that I would say when it comes to messaging and branding is, remember, not everyone has all day, right? So have an elevator pitch, have something that you can give to them to go check it out in their free time, right? And be effective, be relatable, but I would say most importantly, be real, right? Be real in every single position that you're in. Yes, you all of a sudden have to go and vote for things, but don't have it figured out when you've never done it before. Be authentic and engage with your community, and you'll be okay. You'll see that a lot more people will support you, and then when they see that, oh wow, you're not here just to go off to the next. You're here because you actually care about the people that you're trying to represent.
Sorry, was muted there. Yeah, I mean, I think the mayor knocked it out of the park with that one. In a great place really to kind of wrap up. We could talk about messaging and consistency in messaging and creativeness in messaging. We could do this for another 3 hours, but start with authenticity. So I will. I know we're getting to the top of the hour here, so if there's any questions or any other comments our candidates and electeds have, we can do that. Other than that, I'll kick it back over to Jacqueline to wrap up the meeting.
Well, thank you for this very informative session and helping us understand what the importance of having family buy-in is, and developing speeches that revolve around what you truly believe in and the goals that you're trying to achieve. I also would like to thank Mayor Reyes for being here with us tonight. All of your thoughts and all of your efforts are very commendable, and thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Campaign in a Box. Thank you, Rock, and thank you, Family Assistance, for helping support the High Desert Pearls in this initiative. I also would like to give you guys kind of like a save the date like last time, and that would be on April 28th at 4. So the fourth Sunday at 4 of the month. And just thank you again from High Desert Pearls. And that is all I have for tonight. Oh, and thank you for all those chats, the gym chats that you guys were dropping too. The questions were very intuitive.
Thank you. We'll see you next month.
Well,
All right, good night.
Thank you so much. You guys have a great night.
Bye.